Shalom Temple Betham. A quick video, a short update, a little piece of Torah, and those who want to stay a meditation. The short communal update is just going to be one item today. Depending on when these emails go out, you either may already have received an email about this or you're about to, but there's an email coming out today from myself and Stuart Tochner, our new shul president, announcing that for the first time we're going to be organizing a small, very careful, in-person outdoor gathering 1 week from today for Kabbalat Shabbat. It's our first attempt at bringing people back onto campus for worship. We're holding it to 30 people, first come, first serve, based on our registration link that's going to come out on Monday. For this first one, only those who are bar bat mitzvah age and up, just so that we can really make sure that everyone who's present can listen to the guidelines and be expected to follow them. And this is a trial run to see if we can do slightly larger ones, whether for Tisha B'Av in a few weeks, and of course for the high holidays. We're both nervous about this, given the fact that society is pulling back, I think responsibly, on gatherings, but we feel confident that we'll be doing this with the utmost care and utmost fealty to the very guidelines that we are living under. Some synagogues that already had moved to praying indoors are pulling back to just praying outdoors. We had not been doing either, so we're moving forward during a very frightening time to gathering in miniature outdoors. Think of the size of our wonderful Zeering field and spreading 30 people out throughout that. We think we can do it responsibly. So if you're interested in coming, look for the link on Monday. It's going to be first come, first serve for a short service for us to bring in Shabbat together. There will also be that Friday night a Zoom in, because we know many of you have really become used to the notion of beginning Shabbat with a Zoom experience, and there will be that in addition, so you'll have that opportunity as well. Okay, that's the update. Here's the brief piece of Torah. We end the book of Numbers this week, the book of Bamidbar, the fourth of the fifth books of the Torah. And the last book, the last chapter, the last few verses of this book of the Torah ends kind of an interesting way. What's interesting about it? You might remember, and I actually spoke about it last week in the video from Parshat Pinchas, the 5 daughters of Tzlofchad, who died without male heirs, who successfully petitioned God for them to inherit their father's land, even though the law up until then had been that only males inherit. Fine, we cheered, way to go, the daughters of Tzlofchad, way to go Moses for taking the case, way to go God for God's answer, right? The way the book of Bamidbar ends, the way the book of Numbers ends, and Bamidbar is called in the wilderness, so in some ways the way the sojourn in the wilderness ends, is that another group of men from the same clan within the same tribe from which the daughters of Tzlofchad came, from the tribe of Menashe, said, hey, wait a second. We are okay with their inheriting land, if that's what God wills it to be. But it's still the case that because they're women, when they marry, their husbands will take over their property, and if they marry from outside our tribe, then over time, land that was supposed to be Menashe land, from the tribe of Menashe, because this was a specific geographical inheritance land of Israel, will no longer be Menashe land, and that's going to mess everything up in terms of what the inheritance of the land of Israel should have been for the Israelites. So they made a petition, which Moses also agrees to, which in some ways undoes or maybe refines what the daughters of Tzlofchad successfully got in last week's Parsha Pinchas, which is that they may indeed inherit their father's land, but they must also marry within the tribe so that the land itself and the map stays the same. It's actually a legitimate thing to ask for. Let the map stay as it's supposed to be. So Menashe is here, and Ephraim is here, and Shimon is there. What are we supposed to do with the fact, not only with that ruling, but that that's how the book of Bamidbar ends? Everett Fox, who is one of the most beautiful and lyrical translators of the Torah into English, and I use him all the time, even though I know most of the words, if not all the words. I love his rendition of it into English. He says that this is tying up loose ends, that there was something hanging out there in terms of what was going to happen with the land of Canaan as a result of the ruling from Parshat Pinchas. This ties it up. We know what the map is going to look like. Moshe, who's not going to go in there with them, can reach the end of his life knowing that he's done everything he can to set up the arrival in the land of Israel as he was expected to do. And basically what it means that Moshe is done all he has left to do is die, essentially, which means that the last book of the Torah, the book of Devarim, or in English Deuteronomy, or as the rabbis refer to it as Mishneh Torah, the second Torah, which because most of it is basically a repeat of the story of the Israelites in the desert, he has to give a few speeches and then he's going to die. So in some ways, the end of the fourth book of the Torah is considered by some to be the end of the Torah. I want to say that again. In some ways, the end of the fourth out of 5 books of the Torah is understood in the corpus of the text to be the end of the Torah itself, and the 5th book of the Torah, Devarim, is an add-on, is an asterisk, it's an addendum. The modern, still alive, still prolific Everett Fox in some ways agrees with a non-modern Hasidic Rebbe, the Ishbitzer Rebbe Mordechai Yosef Leiner of Ishbitz, who wrote a commentary on the Torah called the Mei HaShiloach, the Waters of Shiloach, and he says something different, but from the same question. Why does this book of the Torah, which in some ways is the end of the Torah, end with something seemingly minor and related to that hour and only that hour? This tying up the loose end of the daughters of Tzlofchad's inheritance and making sure that they're only going to marry, that those 5 women, only those 5 women, this is not a national law, that those 5 women agree to marry within their tribe, that's the way the Torah ends? He says that in his commentary. In some ways, this is the end of the Torah. The Torah, which is supposed to be given for timelessness, essentially ends on a note that is very time-specific, that is focused on a law for just that hour, just that situation. What are we supposed to do with it? So the Ishbitzer actually quotes a verse from the book of Deuteronomy, which we're about to read, obviously, meaning that's coming up in the next book. Ki lo alechem levado yichyeh adam. It's not just on bread that a person can live. Ki al kol motzaf pi Adonai yichyeh adam. But rather on every utterance from God's mouth must man live, must a human being live. What does the Ishbitzer say about it? He says that the first phrase, it's not just on bread alone, bread, the core, the substance that must a human being live, but anything that comes out of God's mouth, in some ways, anything that comes out of our mouths also is our sustenance. And what he says is the reason why the Torah, which is supposed to be a timeless document, ends on a verse and a law, which seems to be a very time-specific document, is to remind us that it's not just the unchanging, age-old, we never are going to read these verses differently from the Torah. It's not just that revelation from God at Sinai that is our spiritual sustenance. It is the everyday interpretation and rolling out and application of God's wisdom and the Torah's verses that gives us our spiritual sustenance. In some way, the Ishbitzer is saying something very modern, very conservative, that the Torah itself includes within it a commentary on the Torah, and that commentary is that the Torah, the way the Torah becomes timeless, is only when it is applied specifically for the moment that you are living in right now. Think about that a second. A Hasidic Rebbe is saying that the Torah's purity is exemplified in its ability to be purified by us in this moment. And that's why the end of the 4th book of the Torah is in some ways the end of the Torah. The Torah ends by saying to us, interpret me. The Torah ends by saying us, make God's will manifest in your life for what it means today. The Torah ends with an example of applying age-old wisdom to the specific needs of this moment, because that's how revelation, which started at Sinai, still continues. Our great challenge as serious Jews, engaged with our text and engaged with our tradition, is both to have proper reverence for our inheritance of the Torah as is. We don't edit this text, even the hard verses, even the problematic verses. We read them as they are. That is part of our sacred obligation, and part of our obligation as serious Jews living in this moment is to try to hear God's will emanating from those verses, but applied to our lives right now, so that our living out of Judaism is a part of the revelation of Torah at Sinai, ongoing. You get to reveal Torah this Shabbat. You get to reveal Torah every day by how you make your Jewish choices, by how you treat one another, and by how carefully and tenderly you hold this text, listen to it, and apply it to your life on this day. If you're not interested in a meditation, then I'll sign off and tell you that I do miss you and I love you, and Shabbat Shalom. And if you're interested in a short meditation, these meditations are shorter than the ones that I actually do on Wednesdays and Fridays at 12, but here we go. I invite you to close your eyes. I invite you to place your feet flat on the ground beneath you, so you feel that contact point between you and the earth. And just start being aware of your breathing without feeling the need to change it yet. Just remind yourself what it feels like to re-enter your body, a body that we're always living in but not always aware of, as a beautiful heaviness dances a waltz with a beautiful lightness, and our body sets and perhaps tingles and rests and also becomes more awake than we have been yet today. You can go to places in your body that feel tension or soreness and see if you can use the amazing power of your mind just to direct your consciousness to that spot, and almost like a miracle worker, like your own Mr. Miyagi in the Karate Kid, which I was not expecting to say in this meditation. You heal a soreness, you unlock a sense of being tied up just by focusing on it. This is not an anatomical heal, a physiological heal. It's using something perhaps even higher in the system of our minds to be in touch with the needs of our body. And it can be effective. I want you to think about God's Word, revealed once, revealed always. God's Torah, given at Sinai, given today. And I want you to think of your role in this grand narrative. Listening closely to the words that were revealed then, and giving those words vitality by your living them out now. What is my responsibility in the revelation of Torah? What is my sacred job to make Torah come alive today? What part do I play not only as a member of my family, of a Beth Am Shul family, not only as a member of the Jewish people, but a member of the species to whom God gave Torah once so that it can be received every day hence. I am a translator of Torah. I am an obeyer of Torah. I am a student of Torah. I'm a devotee of Torah. I am a vessel for God's presence in this world. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And I say to you, Shabbat Shalom, and I miss you, and I love you.